Welcome tonight. It is so great to see all of you. I really am thankful that you're taking the time in order to talk about a frustrating topic to all. Um, I have been doing a podcast for about a year. I've been teaching for about 10 years. And it's really been an interesting journey in that my most popular podcast that had downloaded in the last year is the one on anger management for parents. I was just shocked and dismayed that it's such an overwhelming problem to us parents. And I hope and pray tonight that I will give you some things that you can do in your house to keep the anger at bay a little bit more often. And in order to do that, I want to start off first by talking about what makes us angry. And in order to do that, I'm going to go to shared screen mode and bring
This would be good for you.
Okay, ready? Here we go. First, what makes us mad? I want to take just a little time to talk about what makes us mad, kind of like get it off our chest and stuff like that. I have a Facebook group called Parenting Decoded, and I asked all the parents on that group, I said, what makes you mad at your house? And they gave me lots of ideas about what's happening in their house. And I kind of categorized them into a couple different categories. The first one has to do with defiance and attitude. Let's see if this, feel free to raise your hand along the way to see if these things resonate with you. How about disobedience? Does that make anybody mad? Ignoring? That was one of the dads was saying, your daughter is just ignoring you, not listening. Disrespectful. Some of us have to deal with kids who are saying like, "Oh, you're the stupidest mom in the planet," kind of stuff, or there, "You're mean," or that we get really mad when we're getting grief. Just asking them to do things like, why should we get grief for asking them to do something? Another thing that makes us really upset is having to ask 10 times. Like, why do we have to ask 10 times? That's ridiculous. And how about not accepting consequences without having a big drama fest about it, where we're just trying, it was something that they did and they're just giving us grief. So that's kind of like this attitude, defiance, category of anger that things drive us, get us angry. How about things that make extra work for us? This adorable little girl in this picture has dumped all of her goldfish all over the floor, and you can just see it kind of seeping in the rug and, and grinding into the floor. It's like so mad. And the reason why we get mad is because it creates a bunch of extra work for us. A spill, if they're spilling their juice all over the table or some other accident or whatever, it's so frustrating. One of the things that a bunch of my parents wrote in about was that snacks in their house is driving us crazy. They're having to do all this work to make extra snacks because our kids are at home during COVID. And normally they'd be at school or whatever, and they wouldn't be asking for all these snacks. And it's just it's making the parents mad. Not picking up toys and clothes. Like, why can't they just pick up their own stuff? It makes us mad that we have to even do that. The third category that I bunch things into is stuff that wears us out and makes us mad. First thing, whining. Anybody have kids that whine? Anybody have kids that whine and it makes you mad? Yeah, it's easy to get mad about whining because it's so annoying. How about not doing schoolwork or homework? We've got a lot of families that are having kids have trouble with on distance learning and all that kind of stuff, but learning anyway. It's just been really wearing on us all. Kids that scream, I can't be around kids that have high pitched screams. It's just, oh, that's awful. How about sibling fights? Any of you with multiple kids that it makes you mad to hear your kids fighting all the time? Like they're fighting just all the time. All of a sudden they'll be happy, happy, and then whoa, they'll be screaming fights. It's just awful. How about what we do when we're angry? Those were the categories. Did everybody at least get one? Any other ones anybody wanted to type in? Sarah can read them for us if there's something that really that I didn't do, you feel that I didn't cover. But what I want to talk about now is I want to talk about what we do when we're mad, because different people react to being mad and angry differently. The first and most common one, of course, I think of as yelling. Yelling when we're angry is really common. I also think that a lot of parents who aren't yellers by nature, I personally haven't been a parent who does a lot of yelling, but I could be mad and be telling my kids what to do. And it's not the same as screaming at the top of my lungs. It's just like, you got to do it my way kind of mad. Um, the other thing that happens when parents get mad is they'll nag their kids. They're like, why haven't you picked up your shoes? Why haven't you done your homework? Why haven't you, and it makes us mad. So we nag more. And we also tend to punish. When we're mad, we'll take away the cell phones, we'll take away privileges, we're just mad. Go to your room kind of stuff. So I want to talk about how those different types of being mad relate to what our kids are doing. Does it work? Sometimes those things work, don't they? It's part of why we do it, right? It's because sometimes it works. But how long does it work for? How about yelling? If we just look at that one thing, does yelling work? Well, sometimes it does because we're bigger than our kids, especially when they're young. Sometimes it works. And sometimes we just have to yell louder, right? But I want to say that it creates fear, especially in younger kids. It creates fear so that the kid will do what you say because they're scared of you. What we want to create in our households, though, is that kids do what we say because it's the right thing to do, because it's their responsibility or whatever. So it kind of complicates things by us setting up fear. Well, what are the effects of fear on our kids? Well, oftentimes it makes our kids step away from us. When our kids are really little, they love us so much that even if we yell at them, an hour later they'll come back and they'll want hugs and kisses and stuff like that. But if we have a tradition in our household of yelling year after year as they grow, when they get into middle and high school, they will take steps away from us to avoid us because they don't want us to yell at them. They will take steps to hide things from us and do all sorts of things that are breaking down the communication. But they'll also do things that, because they're in a state of fear, when we're in a fight and flight mode, our brains don't work. Our prefrontal cortex is shut down because our fight and flight center has taken over. And that means that they can't think very clearly. So if we as parents are yelling at them because they didn't do something right and their brains are shut down, how are we ever expecting them to be able to solve the problem, whatever the problem is that they might have caused themselves? So if they can't solve problems, it means we might be the problem solvers all the time. We might have to tell them what to do because they can't think on their own. And if they can't think on their own, eventually they're going to look to somebody else to solve their problems. And as they grow and head into middle and high school, those people that help them solve problems, to figure out how to get away from mom and dad, to figure out how to get out of, you know, being yelled at all the time, they're going to go to their friends, they're going to go to other people, and they're going to wind up looking for other people to tell them what to do because they don't always know, because they haven't been given the opportunity to think and to solve their own problems and to be responsible for their problems. So what does that mean? It means that we've created followers. And I don't know if anybody here wants to do one of those, what is a reaction on your screen, but how many of you are signing up to create followers? Like, we are all trying to raise leaders, right? Leaders are what we're trying to raise. And here, by using fear with our kids and yelling at them all the time, we're creating followers. Either follower, or if your child, by the time they get older, they haven't switched to being a follower, they'll probably be a rebel because they will be trying to figure out ways to get at you in ways that aren't very productive and not very healthy. So let's move on to nagging. Does nagging work? And here's where I'm going to have Sarah do a poll for us. And in the poll, I want you're going to choose one of these options of how long it takes to get nagging. Do you, in order to get your nag to work with your kid, does it only take 2 or 3 nags, 4 to 6 nags, 7 or more nags, or it never helps? Nagging never makes a difference. So go ahead and type in all your answers. We'll tally them up here in a couple of in a minute or so. But nagging's kind of a challenge for us all because it allows our kids to not be responsible. If we have to ask our kids to pick up their shoes and put them somewhere every day, day after day, it means that they're basically not listening to us. one of the dads at the beginning was saying you were really frustrated because your kids aren't listening to you. And every time you nag and there's no consequences, um, it's a problem because we're training our kids not basically to ignore us. So we need to have really clear boundaries in loving ways so that our kids know and trust that what we're going to do is valid. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and publish the poll, Sarah? I think we have enough. Can everybody see that? It's so cute. I was wondering what the poll results would be. The most common result, this is for the sake of the video recording in the podcast, is that 30% of the time, 100 or more times never helps. It just doesn't help to nag. Lots of people have, let's see, 2 to 3 times, it's 25% of years. It's about 23%. It takes 4 to 6 times of nagging. 7 or more times, 23%. That's a lot of nagging, don't you think? Thanks for taking the poll. So I want to talk a little bit more about nagging though. Let's go to, so does nagging work? Well, sometimes it does. Everybody's still doing it, right? Like we still nag our kids, but what happens when we nag? Well, as I said earlier, they basically don't take us seriously. If you have to say anything more than twice, it basically means that the first time you said anything was as if you didn't say anything. So what do we do about that? They don't take responsibility for anything. Do you have kids? Do you know families? Maybe it's your family who has someone who's lazy, or you feel that your kids are entitled. Anybody got that? You want to raise a hand? Anybody with lazy kids? Well, a lot of times it's because we've nagged them into not having to take responsibility for anything. You know, it's a kid just sitting on the couch like, why should I have to do chores? Mom's going to do them for me. Why should I have to put away my shoes? You know, dad'll do it for me. You know, it's like there's no reason. They're just going to nag me and doing my homework. I'll do it when I want. How about punishing? Does punishing work? In this graphic, I have a really happy teenager, don't I? It's beautiful. She's so happy playing on her cell phone. And what happens when we punish these days? One of the most common punishments is what? Electronics. We're going to take away electronics, aren't we? Anybody do that yet? You could raise your hand. People taking electronics away from their kids. What a great punishment. It's so effective, right? Our kids get really upset when we take away their electronics. And sometimes it does work, right? But I don't think that it does what we want, because how many of you have had to take away electronics more than once? Like maybe you take it away every day because it gets you a short-term response out of your kid. Like maybe they'll go do their chore or something like that, but it doesn't get a long-term response. And what I'm looking for is in their hearts. What is it in their hearts that we're getting? Well, my premise is that when you take away electronics, doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 15 years old, they are going to think about you when you take away that device, when you are punishing them. And they are going to think not nice thoughts about you. And you know what? The reason why you took it away from them was something that they did. Let's say they didn't take out the trash, or they hit their brother, or something like that. But it was a behavior that they did. But the whole punishment time, they're thinking about how mean you are. It doesn't seem to be what we want. This is the equivalent of the old time you ground your kid. Like when I was a kid, a lot of my friends might get grounded. And the whole time you're grounded, all you're thinking about is how mean your mom and dad are. And we don't want that. We want our kids to take responsibility. And so punishing with things like taking away electronics isn't very useful. I do have a podcast to talk about consequences, and that you might want to listen to, because it can be really effective if you pick the right kind of consequences instead of punishing them so that they're not mad at you. This is a behavior change, yes. So long term, what's up? Anger destroys relationships. It really does in the long term, especially if it's present. But lots of anger destroys relationships a lot. So if you have lots of anger in your home, that's a big problem. What would we like in our homes? We'd like obedience, order, peace and quiet, chores done, respect. We'd like just some happiness, right? Isn't that what we're looking for? Well, I want to observe one thing. I want to observe that communication builds relationships, and good communication is going to get you through parenthood. The most relevant piece of information I can give to you as a parent educator is that the most important skill that you can have to get you through is good communication with your kids. Even if they wind up doing things that make you mad along the way or annoy you or whatever, if you can come together on a regular basis to communicate, you will be able to get through just about anything. But if anger gets in the way, you will drive your kids away and you won't have a communication path to battle and to solve problems together long term. Okay, so that's my observation and my advice to you. So now what I want to do is I want to move to how we create safe relationships with our kids. How do we do that so that we can have a relationship so that we can move forward? And the way we're going to do that is something that I termed the relationship safety team. We're going to create a safety team in your house that will help you get through moments of anger. There's 3 parts to the team. First one is you. Second one is your spouse or significant other, if you have one. Third part, your family. You're going to get your kids involved too. How do you do that? I'm going to go through each part now. And safety team number 1, it's you. And you are going to first start out by figuring out, you're going to train yourself to feel anger coming on. And I call it going up anger mountain. And anger mountain is where those tingling sensations of when you start to get annoyed. It might be sweating, it might be muscle tension. For me, last week, I was getting really upset about something and my heart was racing and I could tell I was really upset. And I had to do the next thing, which was recognize the fact that I was headed into fight or flight mode. And if I were to react to the people that I was mad at, I would not say nice things. I would be angry and I would say things that would not be helpful to solving the situation. And so what I had to learn to do was I had to learn to not trigger myself. That's what I want all of you to do, is think about how to not trigger yourself. And one of the ways to do that is to do something that we call going brain dead, where you just don't engage. It doesn't mean that you completely ignore the child or the situation, but you switch to an even, loving, empathetic tone. Like, Mom, you're so stupid. Give me back my electronics. I hate you. It's like, I know. I really want a cookie right now. I know. I need to go to the store to get a birthday present. It has to be right now that I have to go do this. It's like, oh, that's so sad. Yeah, I don't have time for that right now. Why not? I'm so important. It's like, oh no. And so you give them a little bit, but you're not going to argue with your kid. If they call you stupid names, you're such a stupid mom. I'm not going to react. I am going to let the attitude, a bad attitude, be ignored for now, and I will deal with it later when people are calm. I will let my kids know later when we're all calm that it hurt my feelings that they called me names and what they could do to maybe put energy back in me. But I'm not going to start an argument over them yelling at me and calling me names and saying, you don't appreciate anything I do for you. I'm not going to go there when there's anger on either side. But for sure, I need to make sure on my side, I'm the only one I can control. And so I need to learn how to control myself. One of the things that you can do, especially if you're trying to go brain dead and your kid is constantly badgering you, separate. If you think you're going to especially continue to be triggered, separate yourself. Go in the bathroom, lock the door. Some parents, they tell me, is like, but they chase after me and they pound on the door. It's like, I'm so sorry that they do that, but you need to get out of Dodge. You need to just not be there. And until things are calm. And if your child's still really out of control, we might want to think about some other things to do. But for right now, you are the number one part of the safety team of keeping yourself and your anger in control. One of the things you might do are mindfulness techniques. Deep breathing can work really well, especially on a short notice. There's calming apps. Does anybody use a calming app like Headspace or Calm or anything? Some people do. I want to teach you one that I learned from a fifth grader last week. I want everybody to take their hands. I won't be able to see all of you. Take your two fists and put them ahead of you. And I'm going to have you squeeze them as hard as you can for 5 seconds. Okay, ready? Squeeze 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let go. And take a breath. You feel a little better? I was pretty impressed that a fifth grader knew that. I liked it. I liked it. The last thing about team number one, meaning you, is that if you really find that you can't control your anger, get professional help if you need to. I think it's really important for your family's health and safety if you really feel that you can't control your anger. Next team member is your spouse or partner. I want you to figure out some verbal signals. I want you to be able to take an off-topic, gentle tone with someone. For instance, in my house, I had a cat. And so my husband and I could work on a thing like if I was getting angry, he could say, honey, I think the cat water dish needs to be changed. Or, have you seen the brush for the cat? I need to brush the cat. Or it could be, oh, I heard that there was a package at the front door because we're getting a lot of Amazon deliveries, right? So it's like, figure out a way when you and your partner are offline, meaning speaking at night after the kids are going to bed or whatever, you guys figure out a strategy of a topic that when you say this to each other, that it means that I love you and I've noticed that you're getting upset and I will have your back. I want you to also have an option if saying verbal words don't work very well for you, then I want you to decide on some sort of physical cue or touch that works for you that says, I love you and I can see that you're getting upset and I will help you out. For example, one of the things I talk about in my podcast is my husband and I, who've been married for a very long time, it took us about 10 years to come up with this touch solution where my husband, he occasionally likes to tailgate when we drive, and it really makes me scared. And I do not tailgate. I just think it's not a good use of anyone's time or body. And he just is trying to get to a place faster. And so for years, it would be like, honey, slow down, honey, slow down. And he would interpret that on his side to be like, oh, my annoying wife, she's always doing this to me in the car. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. And so he would immediately get defensive and I would immediately be scared. And it was not getting anywhere. So we had a discussion one evening to say, hey, I just want to tell you what it is that makes me so scared about when you tailgate. I just wanted him to hear my fears and understand where I was coming from. And it gave him a chance to say, like, hey, I hear you. And I now understand more about why you're such a crazy lady. and and he loves me enough that we decided that if I tapped his knee while we were driving, it meant all the words that I was saying before without any words being said. I just tap his knee and he goes, aha, okay, I got it. And he'll slow down. When I'm particularly, not in a good mood, we'll just have me drive so that we don't have this issue. But it just goes to show that a physical cue or something like that can be really helpful if you talk about it ahead of time. So if you and your partner can figure out a couple of things to say, like, oh, I hear the knock at the door or the cat water dish or whatever, some signal that can help you guys say, I got this, I got your back. And that's what I want you to do is I want you to be ready to have each other's back. Because normally what happens in households, if a spouse notices that the other one's getting mad, they say, hey, honey, you're yelling. Stop yelling. That's not good, right? That's what we say to each other instead of like, honey, have you seen the foot massager? Have you seen my 2-pound weight? I want to go do some yoga or something like that. You just have the signal that translate translates that feeling without it actually being the words that cause more anger in the end. You also want to be able to set up a calm down space for your kids, but also one for you. Like I was talking about going to the bathroom and locking yourself in or whatever, but it could be that you say to your spouse, honey, I think you need some calm down, and you let them go and calm down someplace. One of my families had a really nice situation where the husband could see the wife was getting very frustrated, and he said, honey, why don't you take a walk around the block? And she did. And he handled the girls while she took a walk around the block. And it worked out so well. It was so amazing. I do want you to also think about, as a spousal unit, as a team of two, to think about, are you getting me time? Meaning, is each individual partner getting some amount of recharge time in their day, their week, their month, whatever? But if they're not, it can lead to a lot of anger and buildup, if nobody, or maybe if one spouse is getting all the me time and not the other. So you need to communicate about all those things. Third part of the team is your children. This is a little bit scary, and not many parents do this, where they allow their children to give feedback and help the family get over things that cause anger in the household. And I'm going to talk about how we're going to model and how we're going to develop some verbal and nonverbal signals. But the way we do it is we do it with family meetings and brainstorming. I have a whole podcast about family meetings. I love them. I think they embody great teamwork as well as communication in a family. It helps you become a team when you have a problem. You want to, the problem in this case that you all joined on this call for, is that you want to figure out how to lower the anger in your household. And most of you could probably pick one or two regular anger set off situations in your house. One of my families, she has 4 kids. The thing that was one of the major things that was causing her a lot of anger was snacks in her house. She had 4 kids going in the pantry because it's COVID and they're all doing distance learning. They were just going rampant in her pantry, eating whatever they wanted. She would bring something new in the house that they'd never seen before, and they thought, just assumed they could have it. You know, she had the story of Doritos. Mary, we never bring Doritos in here. Within a half an hour, they're gone. And so, so she decided to do a family meeting, and they sat down and they wrote down all the snacks that were allowed with all 4 kids together. One of the youngest is 2, so he wasn't very helpful, but they wrote down all the snacks, how many times they could have them a day, how many times they could have them a week or whatever. They had it by type. They had some that they could have anytime. They had some that they could only have certain times of the day. Like you couldn't have a cookie in the morning kind of thing. They set up rules and boundaries about snacks. And the mom said a week later, she said, it's like a dream. It's like, oh my gosh, not only did she have agreement from all of her kids giving her feedback about what should be on the list and what shouldn't, but she also had everyone helping her with the rules and the boundaries. If one of the kids saw that a kid was going to have a cookie and it was the morning, the other kid could help mom be part of the patrol instead of mom always going like, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. She had a team that they could all do that. She did the same thing when they developed a bunch of rules for going to the swimming pool, a public swimming pool. Who gets the towels? What happens if somebody disobeys and runs on the tarmac or jumps in the pool wrong or whatever? Who brings the snacks? Who brings whatever? And she said it really was amazing. So I want you to do family meetings. And the thing about family meetings is you have them over and over again, not you sort of like check in. How did it go? Do we need to change the snack? You might actually, as a team, decide that there are some signals. Like maybe there's a really cute teddy bear that you leave on the kitchen counter. And when somebody's getting angry, the person who notices the person getting angry just picks up the teddy bear and walks it over to that person. The person might not appreciate it, but it might be like, I love you. I can see that you're getting angry. Do you need some calm down time or do you need a hug? It might be a signal like that. But you could set that up as in a brainstorming, a family meeting session on a Sunday night, let's say during dinner. And then the next Sunday you can say, hey, did that bear help? And if it didn't, maybe you get a different signal. Maybe you get 3 or 4 signals. Maybe each person in your family has a different signal. But it's a process where you're showing your kids how to do problem solving. You're any of these problems that are in your household, it's a iterative process. It is not a one and done. And you want to model that for your children. As they grow into adulthood, you want to give them really solid skills on how to problem solve situations in their lives so that you can trust that they know how to handle themselves and that they can move on through life without running into major stumbling blocks and falling apart. It's part of that growth mindset. And you want to show them that, we didn't do so good setting up boundaries for our anger this week. Let's tweak them. It's totally fine if we mess up. Absolutely. I love it when families mess up and they stick as a team together and they just work on it. So our safety team goal is to prevent anger by doing what? By building trusting relationships. That's what we're trying to do. And you're going to do it by having those different roles in your safety team. You, your spouse or partner, and your kids. But the last phase of this is, how do you prevent the anger triggers from happening in the first place? We started this off about the different categories of, disobedience, sibling rivalry, laziness, tardiness, all those kinds of things that make us mad. But how can we set up our homes so that we don't even get triggered by those things, that we have obedience, that we have siblings that are getting along? So I want to talk about a couple of regular parenting skills that I want you to have in your in your toolkit to make sure. For those of you who've listened to my presentations before, these are skills that I talk about all the time. First one, set loving limits. Make sure that you're setting limits about what you will do. Like you set them in a positive way. So you say, I serve dinner to kids who have washed their hands. I read books in bed to kids who've brushed their teeth. I take kids to soccer practice who've packed their soccer gear. All of those things have connotations where if they don't do something, something's not going to happen. Like they're not going to get their books read to them if they don't brush their teeth. But I'm not going to fight about it because I know that they want to have books read to them. And the first night that they have this happen to them, there might be a tantrum. And I'm okay with that because they are allowed to be upset for not having books read to them. I sort of want them to be upset because the next night I want to read them books. Because a lot of times parents that I deal with, it's one of their favorite parts of the day is to be reading books at night with their kids, and they don't want to give that up. But they're so tired of battling about brushing teeth and getting ready and doing all those things and bath time and splashing and all that stuff. They're so worn out that they're just pissed off and they don't want to, it's like it's definitely a conflict. So I want you to be able to set limits so that you can know that you are giving them a way to know what their boundaries are. And you don't need to lecture about it. One of the podcasts that I did a while ago is about setting limits for food battles. It's a podcast on food battles where a lot of us, especially with younger kids, we're running after our kids, worrying about if they have enough protein, and we're getting them, they're jumping in and out of their seats at dinner table and stuff like that. If that's you, go listen to my podcast about that because it's all about setting limits. Like, oh, I allow kids to have dinner who are sitting at the table. As soon as you get out of the table, it means that you're done with dinner. And that happens only once or twice till the kid knows that their dinner goes away and it doesn't get back to them. And then the next day that they understand that it's going to be a loving limit. It's like we're not going to yell at them or anything. They just decided to not have dinner that day. The other skill that I really want you to embrace is giving choices. You want to share the control as much as possible. Our kids have very little control over their lives. And so what we want to do is we want to give them choices for two reasons. One, so that they feel like they have control, but two is that we practice their brains get practice in how to make choices. In every single day of our lives, there's choices coming at us and we have to decide. And there's times where if we have people who are drill sergeants, yelling and telling it at us all the time, that we don't ever get choices, we just have to do. Well, those kids don't get any brain reinforcement of what to do when you get given a choice. And they get asked like, what would you like for dinner? I don't know. I don't know. Well, what kind of company would you like to work for? I don't know. What kind of school do you want to go to? What kind of car do you want to drive? But they can't decide because somebody's always decided for them. So we want to start at a really young age, offering them things like, would you like milk or juice for dinner? Would you like to skip to the bedroom, or would you like to slither on your tummy to the bedroom? Would you like to brush your top teeth first or your bottom teeth first? Now, those are all really great things for little kids, skipping to the car, jumping to the car, whatever. But as they get older, your kids might want to say, would you like to take the garbage to the street before dinner or after dinner? Would you like to do your English homework first or your Spanish homework first? Would you like to have your electronics for a half an hour or 45 minutes? You give them lots of choices, and you only give them choices so that they're not cornered in a box where you're saying, do this right now. Because when you say, take out the trash right now, you get one of two responses. One is, yes, mom, sure, happy to do it. Maybe not. Or, no, I'm busy. I'm doing something else. And so if you give them a choice, would you like to do it before dinner, after dinner? You're less likely to get resistance. They get to choose. For my boys, I would say, what day of the week would you like to do certain chores? And they chose Sundays. Like, that was fine with me. I just wanted them to do those particular chores once a week. And if they didn't do them, there was a consequence. They could just pay me to do their chores. But you give them choices, and you don't get cornered into this yes, no battle where they're always picking no. And you only give choices that you like. I gave an example before of, do you want to have 30 minutes of electronics or 45 minutes of electronics? That's assuming that I'm willing to give them 45 minutes of electronics that day. So if I don't have 45 minutes to give them, that wouldn't be one of the choices. The other thing I want you to do is I want you to allow mistakes. One of the things in our society is that we are constantly worried that our kids are going to make a mistake and that they're going to miss out on going to Harvard, or they're going to do something that's just going to have really lasting impact on their self being and all that kind of stuff. And what we want to do is we wind up damaging them because their confidence is undermined every time we take care of a problem that they could have as a younger person. Every time we figure out how to pack their backpack for them, how to fix their mistakes on their math test, how to tie their shoes, how to fold laundry, how to make a cake, every time we fix it, they aren't allowed to know how to make it fix themselves. And if you allow empathy and love, and you don't taunt them with, I told you so all the time, they can grow in amazing ways and become self aware, self confident kids that can keep the anger down in your house. For example, if I were to be packing my kids' soccer bag all the time and I forgot their cleats, who would they be mad at? They would be mad at me for forgetting their cleats. But if I allowed them the ability to pack and responsibility to pack their own soccer bag, that means if they get to the soccer game and there's no cleats in the bag, whose fault is it? It's their fault, obviously, but only if I let them own it. And so when they say, Mom, I don't have my cleats, oh my gosh, I can say, oh, that is so sad. You can't play without cleats, huh? I don't say, I told you to pack them. They were right by the door. Why didn't you pick them up? I told you 4 times. This is the nagging part. Like, why do you nag? Don't nag. Like, let them, whatever it is that's happening to them because you nagged, stop nagging and let them feel the consequence of they didn't pack their backpack correctly. They didn't get their math test graded correctly. Their shoes aren't in the right place. Like, oh, that's so sad. But you give them love and empathy. No, I told you so. Why did you do that? You can have a family meeting later when people are calm, or a one-on-one meeting with a particular child to say like, hey, I noticed it was really rough at the soccer game, not having your cleats. Do you want to talk about what we could do to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And maybe the two of you brainstorm to have like a checklist that your child could read that says shoes, cleats, cleats, that is the same thing, shin guards, goalie jersey or whatever. you write that list down and see how it goes. And in a week, you could say, hey, how was that list? Is it helping? So that they own the responsibility. And I don't have to yell at them for mistakes or anything. So those skills that I just talked about, setting loving limits, allowing choices, and allowing them to make mistakes can keep the anger down in your house if you're setting up really good boundaries and giving lots of choices so that your kids don't have a reason to lash out at you. So the
Really,
observation.
really quick, Mary, before we move along. So someone had a question or a comment. So let's say a child makes a mistake, like spilling their drink, and should the parent insist that they clean it up right away? And if they don't do it right away, and then you're asking and you start nagging about it, and they just don't seem to care about cleaning it up, what is the consequence if they don't do it?
Hmm. It's going to depend on the age of the child, and it's going to depend on the situation. Like if the liquid being on the wood floor is going to warp the wood floor, that's a big deal, in my opinion. But if it's on some tile floor and it won't hurt it, it's like, oh, isn't that interesting that it's still there? And I read books to bed for kids who have cleaned up their mess. Um, and so if it could wait until dinner, until that long a time, if it's something that is for a little child, let's say they're 4 and they don't know how to clean up things very well, it's just like, uh-oh, looks like we had a spill. Let's go ahead and get out the rag. And so you take their hand and you show them where the rags are nicely, and you can both work at cleaning it up. And it's like, let's figure out how to clean this up. And then you work with them to build up over time that, like, yeah, when we have a problem, we have to own the problem and clean up after the problem. And if they don't take responsibility for that, then there's consequences. And you'd want to listen to my consequences podcast in order to get more ideas than we can talk about right now. But there would be a consequence to them deciding not to clean up. And there's usually something in their lives that they want from you. It might be they need to be driven to soccer practice if they're an older kid. And it's like, oh, this is so sad. I drive kids to soccer practice who've cleaned up their mess that they spilled.
Mhm. Yeah, and so this was for ages like 9 through 12, and then someone gave a suggestion, just like you said, to use reinforcement statements like "I allow dessert for kids who clean up their messes."
Yeah,
That.
that's
Mhm,
good. It'd be just have to be a little careful about using food as the lever,
mhm,
because there
mhm,
can be some long-term consequences to using food for that. But yeah, it could be, or I play, our family plays games with kids who have cleaned up their messes. Like maybe it's a Friday night game night, and kids who've cleaned up their messes are welcome to play games with us.
mhm,
And it's something that they want to do. And that's the thing, is that as your kids grow, you want to make sure that there's fun in the family, that there are things that you all enjoy doing together, so that you have joy and fun and love that is part of the relationship that has been built, that the kids want to stay a part of.
mhm,
Because if you ruin all your relationship with them so that it's all based on anger, they won't want to be around you. They won't want to clean up their messes. They won't care. Fine, I won't go to soccer and all that kind of stuff. That's a really negative uh, relationship that you're spiraling down into, which you want to avoid. If you happen to be in that situation already, I know that there are a number of parents who signed up who have teenagers and teenagers. um, it's a hard place to be, and you have to rebuild communication. You have to spend a lot of time building ways to communicate with those kids that have over time been shut down to you, probably because of anger in the household, anger on both parts, probably. So, I hope some of this is helpful. I do have a YouTube of how to communicate with teens, that you could also listen to, that would has some stuff about how to set up good communication with your kids, how to repair some of that. That might help.
And there were also two other comments that came in, or questions. So one was, if you want to understand why your child made that choice, how do you go about asking them, why did you do that, without nagging?
The time to do that is when they are not in fight and flight mode. So it would be waiting until after whatever it was happened. It could be, if it was a morning thing, maybe by the afternoon they're calm. Then you could say, could you want to, sit and cuddle and could you tell me about that? What happened? Is there something we can do next time? It's sort of like having a mini one-on-one meeting with them. Sort of like that family meeting, and you brainstorm, like, what could we do next time? Is there something that we could do to avoid that next time? But it's done at a time when there's no emotion and there's lots of love going on.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Then the last comment was, for tweens, electronics seem to be the only incentive that they like. What are your suggestions with other incentives, or how to use electronics as an incentive?
Well, I think that electronics are a huge quagmire for everyone. And I would highly, highly recommend anybody in the audience, no matter what your kid age is, having a contract. It's hard to do it with teenagers because there's too much history already developed with whatever that is. But if they're tweens, maybe you'll have a window of time in setting up limits and stuff with those electronic devices. It tends to be their motivator. Um, and it's okay to sort of use it as a motivator as long as it isn't the only thing in their lives. And if it is the only thing in their lives, then you might want to work really hard to develop some other things in their lives. You could also, there's consequences that happen that people take away those rewards of electronics by saying you can't have it. It's the opposite, it's the punishment. And I would just offer consequences like, oh, it looks like you went on electronics when you weren't supposed to, or you spent 30 extra minutes or something like that. Would you like to replace that really drains my energy? Would you like to do uh, some yard work, or would you like to lose your electronics for a day? Would you like to scrub the kitchen floor, or would you like to lose your electronics for a day? So that you give them some choices. And, a lot of our kids these days would pick doing the floor. And the whole idea is that when a kid does something that is not allowed, or whatever the case may be, that the kid is able to own it in a way that they learn from the experience. And when they're scrubbing the floor because they use their electronics inappropriately, they hopefully will be thinking, they might be thinking, what a mean mom you are. But you gave them a choice whether they wanted to lose electronics or scrub the floor. So it was their choice. They could have just lost the electronics. So I don't know if that's that helpful, but I would, on my website, my Parenting with Logic website, I have a digital contract and an example of one that has in it things that are good to digital citizenship kind of things for any family about I know passwords, I can look at any time. We use, we don't bully and all those kind of things, but it also has in the contract, it has consequences where the kid is participating in defining what the consequences are. It was designed by one of my friends he's a Google employee that has a middle schooler and a high schooler, and the kids participated in setting up what it was, and there's different levels depending on the offense and stuff like that. So, but the more conversation you can have with older kids so that they feel like they're being listened to, the better off you're all going to be. Find out why they did what they did, have a conversation is going to be more important than punishing them. If you can have a real conversation about whatever it is, they could be smoking marijuana, they could be, you know, bullying somebody or whatever. Rather than slamming them down with any consequence, I would have a conversation is more important to me. Not to say that I do think consequences are important, but as your kid grows older, you need to make sure that you can communicate with them. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, and these are the same two observations that I made before. Communication builds relationships, and good communication will get you through parenthood because it's a tough time. I have one fun story to talk about communication and anger. I told it in my last podcast on lying and cheating and stealing. And this mom who was a bad, she had grown up in a drill sergeant kind of family where she had to just do everything, was told what to do, yelling, screaming, and stuff. And she grew up rebelling. She tried to do anything she could to lie, cheat, and steal her way out of her childhood. And eventually, years later, she became a mom herself. And she knew that she did not want to have that kind of relationship with her son. And so she decided to set up a communication mechanism with her son, who was like 5 or 6 at the time, something like that. And they posted a rule in their house, and her son decided a code word, and it sort of relates back to you setting up codes and signals in your household. So this was their signal. The signal that they chose was the word cheese pizza. And they decided that whenever her son said the word cheese pizza, it meant that mom had to take a deep breath and count to 5 and not be mad. Like that was just the agreement. And the mom was like, yeah, this is going to be good. We won't need this for a while. Well, 3 days later, her son comes home from school and says, Mom, cheese pizza. And she was shocked that it happened that quickly, but he had been playing on the playground at school, and he had torn his brand new pants, and at the knees he went right through the knees, and he knew his mom was going to be mad. And so them having set up ahead of time a signal called cheese pizza helped mom take that breath and that counting to 5, so that she knew her son wanted to communicate with her. And in order to communicate, she had to be willing to be calm, that they were able to solve the problem. And that's not to say that her son didn't pay for the, fixing the pants or something like that, put knee patches on or whatever. You can include your child in the repairing of things that break. I think that's really important. But it just goes to show that if you set up little signals like that, there's it just takes away a lot of the need for blowing up and going crazy as a parent and being really pissed off. So that's my little story. I have a couple of things. If you need more help, I do have a podcast. A lot of you are new to my work, and I have a podcast I started right as we went into COVID. It's called Parenting Decoded. You can find it on any podcasting site, but Sarah has the ability. She can put the link in the chat box to my podcasting site itself. But there's number 10 was on punishment and consequences, more info on family meetings. If you need help with creating choices or boundaries, or if you have tantrums, I did a whole hour-long lecture last month, sorry, on tantrums. But there's also a shorter podcast, number 6, that is on tantrums, if tantrums are a problem in your house. I've been translating some of them to YouTube videos, and this talk is going to go to YouTube, hopefully within the next week at the most. But I have that one on communicating with teens, and I have one on solving tantrums. I also have a new seminar that I'm going to put up, that I just announced. I put it on my website today. Sarah's going to put it in the chat box for me. On Zoom again, like this, it's on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday, same time. It has the right Zoom link on it already, but sign up for that. If you need help, you can reach me, Mary at parentingdecoded.com. I have a website. I have a parentingdecoded.com website, but my original website is called parentingwithlogic.com. Some of you know me from that. I have a really fun Facebook group that I would love more of you to join, just to be able to have conversations about parenting issues, called Parenting Decoded 2021. I have an Instagram feed. I do a monthly newsletter. If you want to know about talks that I'm going to do, or what the latest podcasts are, if you're not already subscribing, it's a great place to just get what Mary is up to right now. I do teach a Love and Logic class, but in COVID, I haven't been teaching it. I've been doing it private lessons, and I can't see what my last thing is. One sec on my screen. It's like, oh, well. Oh, you can hire me as a coach was what it was. But that's it. I really appreciate you guys coming, and I'm open for questions and answers. And you can either unmute yourself or go ahead and type in, and Sarah will be our interpreter.
So we do have a couple questions that came through. So someone was saying, I see how the I allow blank for kids that blank statements being motivating as opposed to nagging. But it seems like this alone would send the message that kids only do their responsibility when they want something rather than teaching them good habits and responsibility for their sake. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was a really long question. And it would be easier for me to know a particular example.
Mhm.
Is there something that comes to mind?
So I think they're more thinking like, would those statements at first would be motivating, but is that truly teaching them the responsibility and good habits?
Okay. Um, if you do this consistently with love and you do the other things with it, where you're setting loving limits, where you're allowing them to own their mistakes, like when they, let's say, I'm just trying to think of an example. Let's say packing their soccer gear that I was talking about. It's like I drive kids to soccer who are ready, and you let them own what ready means. And if they don't get what ready means, that's fine. That's fine for now, because when they get to the game and they're missing something, it's like, oh, that's so sad. I hate it when I miss things. Um, so that teaches them responsibility because I've set a loving limit that I'm going to take them to the game, and they know that I'm going to do that. But if they're not ready, if they're going like, oh, mom, I need to go now. It's like, oh, are you ready? It's like another limit is like, I drive kids to soccer who've cleaned up their bedroom. Like, I don't need to drive him to soccer or her to soccer, but if they'd like me to drive them to soccer, I just need them to clean up the bedroom. And so the consequence is their choice, and I have to not want to battle about that. They get to choose. I don't know. Have I hit upon an example that makes sense to, to I don't know.
Um, so another question was, do you have any tips to deal with sibling fights? Um, and specifically sibling fights that are only, let's see, are only 5 and 18 months and already a real source of tension in our home. So some young sibling fights.
So I would have a family meeting. With an 18-month-old, it's pretty hard. You're pretty much going to have a family meeting with the older of the two children. And I have done this with families, who have kids that young. And a lot of it is brainstorming with with the older kid about how to protect their toys, how to protect their space, how to get that other child to be in a safe spot so that they're not interfering with that one. And continuing to talk about like, oh, I see that Billy got in your space again. I was, one parent that I've been working with recently is that they were really upset that the older kid pushed the younger kid. I was like, well, what was the younger kid doing? And it's like, well, she was just reaching for his toys, and he had put them up on the couch. He thought they were far enough away, and they weren't, so he pushed it. I was like, well, the problem solving here is, maybe we need to put the toys even further away, or maybe you go in the playpen and little baby stays out so that you're okay with your toys. Maybe you play with your Legos in your room so that the baby does, and we put a baby gate at your room or something like that. But it's siblings issues, especially that young. You're going to have to work with them to try to figure out what it was that caused the problem and say, what could we do next time? And there's going to be some sibling stuff happening in all of our homes, no matter what. And most of the time, you try to give the kids words to say, like, no, thank you. And that's part of the problem solving. It's like, okay, Johnny, how could we use our words with little Billy? And we can give little Billy some words to say no or mine or, whatever. But like the older kid could say, no, thank you. Somebody had just sent me a really cute video of two kids that are about those ages, and how the older brother kept using his words. And the older brother wound up giving the little brother a toy as a trade. The little brother wanted the main toy, and the bigger brother used his words and wound up figuring out how to give the little brother something else, and the little brother was happy about that. But it took the older kid words, and the parents continually encouraging what kind of words could we use with the siblings. And as they get older, same thing. When your kids are fighting, it's like, oh, that really is an energy drain. In Love and Logic land, that's what that's called. And oh yeah, it really drains my energy to hear two kids fighting. What are we going to do about that? And we'd have a family meeting about it. Like, yeah, I noticed that you guys are fighting about who uses the laptop. I noticed you're fighting about breathing on each other. I mean, like my siblings, we used to breathe, that would be a fight. And it was like, you as parents have to like, wow, this is so interesting. I'm so sorry that you're fighting. What can we do about that? And work with them, get them to, there's no person better in your life, I think, in your kids' lives to learn about personal relationships than being able to work with a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
You have two, Sarah.
Yes, we see those fights all the time.
Lots of challenges.
So if you don't address a situation right in the moment that it's happened, is it okay to wait until the child is calm, or have you missed the learning moment if you wait too long?
I don't think you miss the learning moment. And I think that especially in moments where you're triggered, I think that it's even okay for the parents to say, we're a little too upset right now. Let's deal with this later. But if you don't even realize that there was a moment that happened and you want to come back to it, I think that it's okay to have a one-on-one of like, I noticed how you treated your friend at the playground. Can we talk about that? I think it's that kind of stuff's powerful, especially if they're calm. I mean, the things that you're going to get done in life with your kids are going to be most likely and most impactful when everyone's calm. It's not going to be when everyone's upset. That's my opinion.
So those are all the questions that were in the comments. So if you just want to,
Okay.
one wants to speak up if you have any questions.
I actually have a question for you. I unfortunately missed the beginning part of the session, but I was wondering if well, one of the things that my husband and I struggle with, we have a child that's special needs, and we struggle with focus, and we find ourselves getting really upset and frustrated, over the challenges of maintaining focus, helping our son maintain focus. And I was just wondering if you have any recommendations on how my husband and I might be able to, especially when we're by ourselves, find our way around getting so frustrated and keeping perspective that this child is different.
Yeah. You heard my safety team analogy with the you part. Like, do you have one thought that comes to mind is making sure that you guys have some mindfulness things that you can go to, especially if you said sometimes you're alone, you don't have somebody who can tag team you and go like, hey, honey, I got this. Because that's the frustration, I'm assuming, is when you don't.
Yeah, we're both working parents, and one of us is sometimes off taking meetings, and the other one is left with two kids, and one of which is struggling. And it gets to a point where you're in the moment and you're just, why can't you just focus? How many times do I have to say this? And then it becomes the back of my brain is telling me this isn't fair to him, and you should know better. But the emotion's already out, and he's already feeling bad about himself, kind of thing. And I'm trying to figure out ways to prevent myself, and my husband does the same thing. So I'm looking for ways that we can actively become, like you said, maybe more mindful, but any tips and tricks how to do that so we don't get into those moments?
Yeah, well, I would do something like, you got lemon squeezes now. Did you hear were you here for that part of the talk? It's like, how can you do the mindfulness in the moment, and also maybe have some things to trigger calmness in you. Like, it could be that you set up a teddy bear a certain place, or that you could actually hand something physical maybe to that child and say, mommy, because you said that when you react in a negative way, I'm assuming that he feels it, that if that's happening, then you might be able to say, set up with him to say, like, I'm going to give you the bear instead of me being a bear.
Mhm.
Something like, have something that says to the child, I'm not safe right now to be with you. And meaning, like, you're still going to stay there with them, but like have some sort of object that you could use. Because I think an object, I don't know that much about special needs kids, and I'm not a therapist by any means, but something tactile. That's just kind of what comes to mind for.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck.
So Mary, we have a question, a distance learning question, and I know we've seen these same struggles at our house too. So how would you suggest struggles with distance learning? He is in kindergarten and sometimes doesn't want to connect or pay attention or gets frustrated when waiting his turn. I'm an adult and I feel frustrated with it some days. So I try to empathize, but I also need him to come and sit down. So what do you have? What are your suggestions?
Well, Sarah, you're a teacher of second graders. Like, you probably have better suggestions than me. Do you have some?
So as far as like you said, empathizing with him and kind of giving him the perspective of the teacher. Like, the teacher has, she sees you, she has 20 something kids on the call, and make sure you're, doing the raised hand icon, or that she knows that you have a question, waiting for the right time. And it is really hard, especially for kindergartners, to connect through Zoom. I mean, I definitely saw that with my kindergartner. You could also see if it's something with where he's sitting for school. Is it comfortable there? Is the chair comfortable? Is it cold? Is there a glare on his screen? So is there like an environmental something that can be adjusted that would help him feel more comfortable? Because it could be something outside that's not necessarily with Zoom that's affecting him as well. But it's a challenge, and I don't have a direct answer with how to get him to pay attention, other than taking brain breaks, wiggle breaks.
We call it a wiggle walk in our house.
Yeah.
Take a 10-second wiggle walk and just get up and just kind of do like a funny dance for 10 seconds, count to 10, sit back down, and then you just kind of get it out, and then you're able to focus a little bit more. So I know that's one thing that's helped us.
Well, there's also, do kids do like fidget spinners and stuff like that too?
I mean, you could have something for him to, fidget with if he needs to sit for a long time. I know in our house we have a little trampoline, and we actually just got a blow up punching bag. There's so much energy that needed to get released during the day, and especially for our kindergartner, he needs that release. So maybe spend, if let's say his Zoom session is 20 minutes, right after, get up, let him get that release out for, you could ask him, how long do you think you need? How you can jump on the trampoline or punch the punching bag. How long do you think you need? And if he says, an hour, it's like, nice try. let's try again. So just coming up with some kind of other energy releases.
Well, it sounds like you guys have spent some time brainstorming with them about different wiggle ideas and things like that. The other thing that I've worked with a few parents on is that sometimes the parents feel such responsibility that they don't want to bother the teacher. And sometimes the teacher has some really good ideas. And that reaching out to the teacher. I had one family who their son was just so bored, and they were, I think, second grade or something like that. And the mother talking to the teacher and saying like, he's so bored, the teacher was actually able to give him extra work. And he's so happy, so much more engaged because the teacher gave him a little bit more work. And kindergarten, I think, is really challenging because, there isn't that necessarily, it's hard to assess the levels of work for that age, I think.
Yeah.
Other questions? We're kind of out of time, you guys. I really appreciate all the thoughtfulness of you guys being here, especially this late at night for some of you that have been up for many more hours. I want to encourage you to download my podcasts, to follow me. If you find that this information is useful, feel free to email me, please. I'd love to help you. You don't have to hire me as a coach. Just send a problem and I'll do my best to get back to you on it. Join that Facebook group just for fun, to feel like you can have some people that can give you some fun ideas. All right.
Someone was asking, where do you find the recorded sessions?
You mean the recorded session for
like this tonight? Where would you
tonight?
find it?
I will send an email just like I did with the new Zoom link. I will send the link to everybody when it becomes a podcast and a YouTube. I will send those out to everybody. Good question. All right. Well, thank you guys. I hope and pray that that you walk away, that you're going to bed with some new thoughts, and that hopefully there'll be a little bit less anger in your house as you kind of process through them over the coming week or so. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Daniel.